Good morning, everyone. It is January 21st, 2014. Yes, I have not yet signed a check or made any mistakes signing anything 2013. I'm so proud of myself. 21 days into the month, and I'm doing good. It is a balmy 13 degrees outside. It's expected to get down into the zeros tonight as we enter our second polar vortex of the year. This one, they are saying, could last a lot longer than the first one and is supposed to be historic in nature. I know I've gotten, we've talked about it on my Facebook page about the fact that, people have lived through these kind of things before in the past. How did our parents and our grandparents grow up and not die through, some cold temperatures? It's winter. It's to be expected. But, back then too, grandparents, great-grandparents, they had probably a little bit more common sense than people do today. We have relied upon electricity and our furnace and all of that lovely technology a little bit too much sometimes, I think. And back then, our grandparents didn't have access to a lot of that. I remember growing up, my grandparents, great-grandparents, still used an outhouse on a regular basis. So times have changed. We can sit here and we can make fun of people all we want to. We can call storms all we want to. We can say that this is normal behavior for winter all we want to. But in my opinion, a lot of people out there have gotten soft. And that needs to change. People need to wise up, get prepared. And I'm not talking doomsday preparedness, end of the world kind of stuff. I'm talking just straight up everyday kind of incidents that are going on. Tornadoes, hurricanes, blizzards. I think we had, and I'm not sure exactly why, about a dozen people died from the last polar vortex that went through. So take some precautions. I know a lot of people out there, if their furnace goes down, they have no alternative way to heat their home. So, educate yourself on what you can do. It's always backups to your backups to your backups. So make sure you have things in place. Make sure that you have extra food and water so that way you don't have to go out into the crazy crowds that are out there. I ventured out last time, hadn't been out. We'll get into that here in a little bit, but did go out into the craziness the last time we were expecting a storm because I wanted to see what it was like. It's not going to do me any good to sit here and bark at you guys about staying home before a storm because you have everything you need when I don't know per se what's going on out there. So I did go out. My husband went with me and it was pure chaos. It was worse than Black Friday. We did not see the beating each other at the front door scene like they talk about Black Friday, but I can tell you there was hardly anything left on the shelves, that people were lined up at the cash registers at least 40 people deep. And it was an experience, I can tell you that. So, just be prepared out there, be wise about your choices that you're making, and, just stay safe. Know what's coming up. We're not expected warm weather here in Indianapolis, at least for another week and a half. And I'm talking above freezing. So, definitely fun times ahead. Even for those of us that enjoy the snow, not so much the cold. I'm getting a little stir crazy and would appreciate some spring weather here coming up. I've got things to plant and dirt to feel between my toes. So let's get started today. A couple things in the news just to keep your eye on. There seems to be a lot of chatter coming from overseas with the Olympics. Huge concern. Could it be a setup all the way around? Yes. Everybody's trying to make Putin look like an idiot, and he's not appreciating that. He has vowed to take out these guys that are setting off bombs around Russia like no tomorrow. He's not one person that I would want to piss off more would be Putin. But that being said, the United States just announced that we would have ships ready to take our Olympic athletes out of Russia if need be on an emergency basis. Just something to pay attention to. It could be a distraction for another event. We've seen that happen over and over and over again. So yes, the Olympics will be going on in Russia, but could something happen here? In the United States, most definitely. Just eyes and ears open. No need to panic. Be prepared, and we'll get through this. So, let's get on with today's show. And I hope everyone can hear us okay. I do not have my headphones on with my mic because my guest today happens to be sitting in his pajamas still in the living room with me. So I want to talk a little bit about getting a spouse involved in preparedness. I know it's a hot topic and one that a lot of people are fumbling around with, trying to figure out. You can't force someone into preparedness if they don't want to don't want to pay attention. You can't force anyone into anything. What you need is buy-in, quite honestly. Unless you have buy-in and they understand and it comes from the heart, you're not going to get very far. So, to the show today, I want to introduce to a lot of you out there. You guys in the chat room already know him because he haunts you guys anytime we're on the air. But I want to welcome my husband. I call him Eddie. His name is Edwin. He's always going to be my Eddie. So Eddie, welcome to the show this morning.
Thank you, dear. It's nice to be here.
Now, a little bit of history. I grew up on a farm in Ohio. We had the last farm we lived at was around 300 acres. Grandparents had hogs, we had goats, we had chickens growing up. We had all kinds of animals, so it's not like it was a foreign concept. I think I saw my first canning jar coming out of the womb. I remember at my grandparents' house, we had a underground root cellar, made out of, if I remember right, it was made out of, railroad ties on the one wall, because my grandfather worked for the railroad back then. It was nothing to see Foxfire books laying on my grandfather's side table. He had a ham radio set up that first taste of that I got was talking to some guy in Scotland. So preparedness and the stuff that we deal with here have been in my life as long as I can remember. You know, we had rabbit dogs. We went hunting. We supplied our own food source. We went to town, you know, not very often just to get the basics that we needed. But flip that, and I'm going to introduce my husband, who, on the other hand, grew up in Brooklyn, New York. So I want him to talk a little bit about how he grew up. And the difference between how he grew up and how I grew up. So, Eddie, would you enlighten everyone to the 1960s, 1970s in Brooklyn, New York?
What do you want me to talk about in the growing up?
Yeah, I mean, how did you get your food supply? You know, things like that.
Well, in the city, you don't really use cars so much, so we would just walk to the grocery store, or we would... and if you're doing a big grocery shop, you take a shopping cart with you, your own personal shopping cart. And you see these a lot, like in Chicago and New York and bigger cities. But, yeah, we would just go to the store and buy what we needed.
So to get your food, how many families around? You know, you lived in Brooklyn, New York, and you're right off the Williamsburg Bridge. So you could actually see Manhattan. I know I've stood in your mom's apartment and looked out the window, and you can see where the Twin Towers used to be. You could see what are some of the Empire State Building and things like that.
Statue of Liberty,
right out,
see New Jersey,
right outside of her living room window.
I could see New Jersey out my back window.
And when Hurricane Sandy came up, it came right up the East River and smacked her right upside her apartment building. So they're right in New York. Now, how many gardens did you see growing up?
None. All we saw was junkyards. Everything was a junkyard. And those have all been developed now into housing complexes.
So a lot of concrete and a lot of bricks.
Yeah, and it was always the same where, like, when you first came to visit and you saw that there was like one tree every 50 feet, if we were lucky.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest, well, one of the biggest issues I have when we do go to New York to visit is I'm good for about 3 days and it's time to go home because there's just not a whole lot of green anywhere.
So, yeah, and whatever green there was, there's a fence around with a sign, keep off the grass. because it wouldn't last 5 minutes with all the traffic coming through.
Now, like I stated earlier, when you were growing up, I'm sure you had storms, nor'easters, things like that going on, and you remember those.
Yeah.
How were your stores back then? I mean, how were they able to be resupplied or anything like that?
Honestly, as a kid, I don't remember that stuff like that. As an adult, I remember that you'd go to the grocery store and you couldn't find bread or you couldn't find the milk when my mom would just say, hey, run over and get us a gallon of milk or a couple gallons of milk. Go find some bread. We couldn't get it. They just never had it. The other thing is with the nor'easters that we used to get, you'd have to walk about a half mile to 3/4 of a mile to the local grocery store, and you're walking through about 6 to 8 inches of snow, easy, and you're fighting the wind. It was, there were times where I'd come in, I thought my ears had fallen off because it was so cold.
Gotcha. So, we talk about growing up and we had to walk 6 miles up a hill naked in the middle of winter. And you actually did have to do that. We think about in New York City as being convenient because everything is right there, but it's not as convenient as a lot of people think it is. You did not drive. I grew up driving in a hayfield when I was like 5, because you'd have to drive trucks around behind tractors and stuff like that to gather things from the field. You actually did not learn how to physically drive a vehicle until you were what age?
I was almost 24, 22, between 22 and 24. And I got my first license was basically through the military, and because my driving was so horrendous at the time, they barely gave it to me. So then... you've gotten a little better. I said a little. And then when I moved from, when I got back out of the service, I got one just to have one. Took road tests and everything in New York City, but I just had it as an ID.
Yeah, because it's so expensive to own a vehicle in New York City.
Just your car insurance alone was about $5,000, and that was 20 years ago. And then you were paying $5,000 worth of car insurance on a car that was only worth about $1,000.
Gotcha. Now, how long after a storm did it take for your stores there to be resupplied? Because you have to go through bridges and tunnels and everything else to even get into Manhattan or into Brooklyn. So if you had a nor'easter going on and the roads were closed, your stores are already out of food. How much longer after that did it take for the stores to be resupplied?
Usually about 2, maybe 3 days. We could find the milk and the bread a couple days later. The biggest problem with the weather like that, especially nor'easters, was they pushed the snow up onto the side of the road, onto the sidewalk. So you really couldn't walk unless you had a car. You couldn't get anywhere. Getting through the whole mess to get to the grocery store, you'd have to literally climb these giant mounds of snow that were 4 or 5 feet up. And you'd have to climb over that because they didn't care about pedestrians. They just pushed everything out of the way. So that way the buses and everything could get through.
And I've seen that. And trash cans are stuck underneath and raw trash.
And it was absolutely disgusting. The minute it warmed up, it smelled horrible.
So anytime, any downgrade situation, you're not dealing just with the elements, you're also dealing with the aftermath of the humans at the same time, which can be quite nasty. And I'm not saying this is indicative of all of New York. We're just giving Eddie's upbringing as an example. His family, his heritage is from Puerto Rico. And it's funny because when I grew up, our family, we baked bread. We used the vegetables out of our garden to make our own foods with the meat that we butchered and whatnot. Now, your family in New York, did you have a lot of home bakers, home cookers, or did they rely more upon, my mom specifically, because my parents divorced when I was little and I lived with my dad on the farm. My mom, though, was more, as I would term her, as a better Betty Crocker cooker. Everything was in a box or out of a can. How would you describe your family and how they cooked and stuff in New York City?
Same exact way. We all, everything came out of a can, out of a jar, out of a box. Just add water, basically. It was how we cooked. You add water, you boiled it for so long, or you baked it, and it was ready.
So if something would happen, they would not have the ability, the knowledge to be able to bake their own bread or make their own noodles or anything like that.
Yeah, probably not. At the time, they would not be able to do that. They didn't have the knowledge. Now, recently, in the last 5 years, my mother decided to start going to some sort of baking school. So
Well,
now
yeah,
she
but
knows
that's
how to
just
bake from
cakes.
scratch. Yeah.
It's not really baking per se. She learned how to make a cake without using a box.
Okay. Well, she's making it from scratch.
Right.
So the principle's the same. So you can make bread too. Wouldn't you be able to?
Yeah, kind of different.
Okay.
But so let's get into talking. So you can understand the differences between Eddie's upbringing and mine. We were raised completely different on the different ends of the spectrum. He grew up in the city, not a lot of resources, not a lot of knowledge, perhaps when it comes to being self-sustaining, versus I grew up on a farm and we did everything ourselves. So, flash forward to 1998, and you have the merging of these two worlds. Has it been easy? Not in the least bit. I think the biggest joke between us is anytime there's a storm. When I grew up, when you got a storm coming, if you didn't get what you needed ahead of time, you just didn't get it and you did without. So we were always paying attention to the weather forecasts and making sure that we were prepared ahead of time. That way, making sure that we had batteries that were working if we had our supplies like sugar and flour and stuff like that ahead of time. You, on the other hand, lived pretty much day to day, sometimes trying to carry, when we went to the grocery store, we had an entire truckload of food that we would bring back. You, on the other hand, because you did not have access to a vehicle and actually had to physically carry everything back to your house from blocks away, you didn't pick up weeks worth of supplies at once. You were pretty much just buying what you needed at the time, correct?
Definitely. We would only buy what we needed, and basically you bought what you could carry. And even that shopping cart I was describing earlier, that would only hold maybe 8 to 12 bags of groceries, like we do in like the kind of, from the local grocery bag.
The old paper bags.
The old paper bags. The old paper bags are about 8 bags, yeah. The plastic one's 12.
Gotcha. So 1998, we end up getting married and moving in together. We have a child and all that loveliness. So dealing with my quirkiness, if you want to call it that, when it comes to preparedness, what are your thoughts on that? And, be honest here.
Well, when I first met you, I thought you were Chicken Little. Oh my God, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Because every time there was a storm, you'd get all Chicken Little on me, and we'd have to go to the grocery store, and we'd have to get like 2 gallons of milk and 5 loafs of bread. And
because I like French toast.
Yeah, and stock up on the eggs and everything else. And, at first it was kind of, this lady's a little crazy. But now I understand the mentality behind it but with the proper way we live, the lifestyle we live now, it makes sense to be prepared in case anything happens, like the last 2 weeks where we got kind of basically snowed in for 4 days.
Yeah, and that was a little disappointing because it's funny because the people around town that we know, we're sitting here prepared for anything, and nothing happens to us, which was disappointing. People out there that we know that weren't prepared, and they're the ones that lost their electricity. They couldn't get out, and it was disappointing on our end, but it made another prepper out there in the world, I can tell you that. So a lot of people realized that, hey, it might not be crazy and be the Chicken Little person, if you want to call it that, to have a few extra supplies on hand. So
it was easy. It was nice being able to, with all the preps, electronic or motorized versus, food-wise. Because just by having a snowblower that we only use maybe twice a year, I was able to clean that driveway out, and we were able to, where our neighbors couldn't get out of the driveways, we could.
Actually, you helped out quite a few neighbors with getting out. When we moved from Cleveland, Ohio, down here to Indianapolis, the first thing, as we were unpacking, the neighbors, all they did was make fun of our snowblower. And it's like, okay, well, when we moved out of Cleveland, it was 18 inches of snow. And that was normal. We were used to that. That happened, because of lake effect snow. That would happen probably at least every other week or so. So we moved down here to Indianapolis. The week after we moved here, they got 13 inches, and it shuts the city down. They're not used to it here. So, yeah, we became friends with a lot of people really fast. But we're getting off on a rabbit trail here. So back up. So how long, Eddie, do you think it took you to realize that I wasn't as nuts as you thought I was?
Oh, well, that was right away. Once I realized your farming background and the history and the fact that when you lived on a farm, you would get snowed in, period. And you guys couldn't go anywhere, and your local grocery store was, 50 miles away or whatever the case is. For us, we could walk. Now, what the difference was I realized that our grocery stores, even though we could walk, were empty. Whereas yours, you'd have to drive. So, yeah, that's what I learned. And that's when I realized that it's not that, it's not that crazy to actually get ready in case you get snowed in for a few days.
And always be ready. I'm not talking about just doing a few things right before you're expecting a storm. I'm talking about sustainable supplies that you always have on hand. Now, we take that a step further. We end up moving to Indiana, and now we have a garden, we have a greenhouse, we have goats, we have chickens, and rabbits and stuff. How did you feel as a city boy coming into a lifestyle like that? Because, yeah, it's great to have food storage, but you have to be able to resupply that food storage. You've learned quite a lot here this past couple of years just being in Indiana. How did you initially feel about having farm animals?
Well, my initial feeling about having a big backyard like this was I wanted to pave the entire thing. Remember that?
Yeah.
I just wanted
to used to having grass.
I just wanted to pave the entire backyard because I didn't want to deal with mowing so much, spending 4 hours on a lawnmower twice a week.
Hey, you should be happy I bought you a riding lawnmower.
Yeah. Okay. But I'm still not a farmer type. I don't consider myself a farmer type. We do it. And it's kind of cool that I know how to do it and stuff. I'd rather do the physical labor than the actual picking. So yeah, if you need the rototiller, I'll run the rototiller. You can maintain and pick the garden when it's ready.
But you're still very hesitant about that at points.
Yeah. I'm just, I'm not a,
But we've sat and we've talked about it, and we've come to a compromise on certain things. You like to do the physical part of it,
right.
Running the rototiller, things like that. So then I do the planting, and it seems to have worked out for us.
Right. Well, building the greenhouse. I built the greenhouse. You plant them and you grow them. And
well, I designed it.
Yeah.
You helped build it.
Yeah.
And then I plant it.
Right. And then, when it comes to picking, the vegetables and stuff, I have no problem going out there and helping you. It's just, I'm not a big fan of the whole day-to-day maintenance of going out there every other day and pulling weeds and bending over and getting.
Oh, good Lord! You have to bend over.
Yeah, those kneel down in the dirt, and it's like,
oh God, don't touch the dirt. Don't touch the dirt.
If I could
You'll die.
If I could pave rows in between your garden, I would have paved rows in between each furrow, so that way I could be on the concrete.
And you have to understand too. My husband, when he gets up in the morning, the first thing he does is puts on his shoes and his socks. And I know you guys in the chat room are probably thinking, yeah, makes sense to me. Now, me, on the other hand, if it's summertime and I'm not at work, I'm barefoot. It doesn't matter. I will walk out in the yard. I mean, that's just how I grew up. When we were out in the fields and stuff, yeah, we wore shoes then. But for normal, everyday kind of just paddling around, I'm barefoot. My kids are the same way. We'll walk out of the house without shoes on. My son will walk out in the snow. He's 13. But I think we've hardened. Who's that guy on TV?
Yeah. He's on Dual Survivor.
Yeah, that guy.
Mm-hmm. Cody Lundin.
Yeah, we're the same way. We like to have dirt under our feet. And I'm talking dirt here. Yeah, I know we've got stories about cow patties and stuff like that. But just dirt. And if you do a little research sometime, it's called earthing. And it talks about the benefit of actually being out in the dirt, barefoot, and touching the ground and what benefits it can bring to you emotionally. And I 100% believe that. I think that it calms me down to be out in the dirt, playing around, and it just makes me happy. My husband, on the other hand, because of his upbringing, a lot of it, wouldn't be caught dead outside in his bare feet. He has tender feet.
Yeah, you have hobbit feet.
Thank you. But we've found a compromise on the things that we do. It's not a straight up. My husband, when I got when I can and stuff like that, he wants nothing really to do with it. But he's seen the benefits of that over the years, and we order a lot of food because there's, believe it or not, in Indiana, there's not a whole lot of really good butchers around here. So we use Zaycon services when they come around, and we order chicken breasts and stuff like that from them just for food storage, because we do only live on an acre to have enough chicken meat to last our family at least for a long period of time. We use an outside source. But the benefits of that he has seen tremendously, and I think he's coming around. Now, would he take over the canning section of our life in preparedness? Probably not. But that being said, we've sat down and we've learned that, his passion is for firearms. He knows a lot about firearms. And so he has pretty much taken over anything. And not that, when I mention taking over, I'm not talking about, we don't both have input on it, because we both do. When I do canning, I'm not going to can foods that he doesn't like. We sit down and we discuss, okay, what do we need? What do we like? What do we want to do? And then, yes, I will do the majority of that. Same way with firearms. We sit down. I'm an NRA instructor. He's an NRA instructor. We're both very involved in it. But it's his passion, more so than mine. So he leads the charge in that area. And does a very good job. So home security, firearms, that kind of stuff, that's kind of his strong suit. So, that's kind of what he does. Does not mean that he's 100% responsible for it. And I want to make that very clear, ladies. It's also your responsibility to take care of your own security. So do not rely upon your spouse for 100% of your security. You will end up bringing more harm to yourself. Think about it this way, and I know I've talked about this in the past. Fukushima happens, you lose, you've got, the big tsunami that comes in. We've seen women that have lost their husbands, their brothers, their sons, their uncles. They're the only female left in their family. And now they get stuck in a camp somewhere. And the camp is set up to protect them, yes. But what I'm saying is that they're now stuck in a camp without any of their male family members, and they do not know how to sustain themselves, protect themselves, or anything. It's very, very, very important that you're involved in this. Do not give total control over your protection to someone else. Would you agree with that?
100%. What I would also say is, if you want to, like you've done with the menus, with the food that we have stored up.
Yes.
Where you printed those menus, right. And then each tote had that little menu inside of it. It's the same thing with that. If, God forbid, something had happened to you and we're stuck, and I can go there and say, okay, there's a menu. My dumb knucklehead self can actually figure that out by going, through that menu and following the instructions. It's the same thing with the firearms and the self-protection. The only thing that with the firearms and the knives and any kind of weapons, you would have to have some sort of training, and that would eventually stay with you. So my recommendation is train. It doesn't matter what you train with. Whether you live in a permissive environment that lets you carry your own firearms, or like before when I lived in New York City, where you'd have to have a special permit just to get a gun to keep in your home. Most people carry knives. And now, I guess in the last 10 years, they've made it so where you can't even carry a knife with a blade more than 3 inches or something less than. So if you're caught with a pocket knife, you go to jail. That's kind of stupid.
Well, it's the same thing though too with getting wrapped up in a gun is your end all for self protection. It's not. We preach all the time: backups to your backups to your backups. You need to have alternate, additional means of self protection. Firearms. We're getting ready in, I think, June to take a baton class in Minnesota.
Right. So we're actually going to go learn to be instructors to teach the ASP baton class.
We spent this weekend with a good friend of ours. His name is Shay, and he runs a company called Mindset Laboratory here in Indianapolis. And the one class this weekend that we took was called Improvised Weapons. And what Shay did was he opened your mind up to utilizing things around you. As, if something would happen, let's say you're in an airplane or in an airport or a school or some place where you are not permitted by law to carry a firearm or a knife or anything like that. What do you have around you that you could pull to be able to use to protect yourself with? So it was an awesome class. We learned a lot. It opens your mind up a little bit, even just to see what's around you. We play situational awareness games all the time in our family. So this was an interesting class. So if you get a chance, I would highly recommend taking a class like that. If you're not in Indianapolis, find one around you if they have it. If not, give me a shout and I'll get you hooked up with Shay. But highly recommend his classes that he teaches out there. He also teaches escaping restraints. We've taken that. Kind of got halfway through the lock picking class, which was quite interesting because as soon as we came home from that, Eddie is at the front door picking our locks and was quite startled on how fast he could pick our locks. So if he could pick our locks after half a class of lock picking class, imagine what a professional can do and how fast he could get in your home. So, after that class, we were going through our house and making adjustments, let's say, to our protection when we are home, because Indianapolis right now has a huge influx of home invasions that is quite concerning. But you kind of led the charge on that too. So now, how are you feeling more comfortable with our lifestyle?
Yeah, I've always felt the one good thing about being your husband, one of the many pleasures when she's not being crazy, is the fact that you made it easy.
Preppers are not crazy.
No, I didn't say that. I said you were crazy.
Oh.
You made it easier for me to understand. You broke out the crayons on certain things. And with the whole growing up in New York, you were smart and you laid into the security aspect of it, growing in for me, so as making sure the doors were secured and the windows were secured. So you kind of led me in that way.
So do you think that helps when instead of just saying, dear, you need to take care of this, or dear, you need to take care of that, saying, okay, this is kind of why, and using the news that's going on out in the world today?
For me, yeah, but you did it a little different too. What you did was, look, you knew that I was always paranoid about the doors being unlocked and the windows. So just one video.
Well, you grew up in New York City. I grew up on a farm. We never locked our doors.
Right. And one time we left our damn door unlocked and some creepy guy just walks right in. And this was on a 13th floor of a building where you only have one entrance and one exit into your house. That
wasn't with me, just to make sure everybody understands that was in New York City when he was growing up.
Well, that's what I said. Okay. I thought I did. So, yeah, no, the one time that my mother forgot to lock the door at the house, some guy, and I remember this because I was probably about Connor's age, I was young.
13-ish.
Yeah, some dude came in and walked in, big, burly, gnarly-looking, filthy dude, just walked right into our apartment. And the problem is that when you live in an apartment, you only have one way in, one way out. So, making sure, again, with the security thing, our door back then had a chain and 3 locks. And it's funny because the first time you came to visit my mother's apartment, because she still lives in the same apartment that I grew up in, was that you had all those lock things, and you were like, well, how many locks do you have on the door?
Yeah, she seriously has like 6
No,
deadbolts on her door. And I think she just locks every other one to confuse people, quite honestly.
Yeah, because sometimes you don't know. It takes you 20 minutes just to get in the door from the outside with all the keys.
But it's funny, visiting New York City and how I grew up. You know, my husband doesn't talk to a whole lot of people when we were there. I'll talk to everybody, but he's like, don't talk to people. And it's like, no, I'm going to talk to people. I don't like rules. I don't like boundaries. It's probably one of the reasons why I do what I do. And as a prepper, as somebody that wants to go off grid, and by off grid, I'm talking about not having to answer to people. You know, I'm a good person. It's not like I go around doing bad things all the time. Do I think I need someone to constantly tell me when to breathe in and breathe out? No, I don't. I think our government is way overstepping its boundaries and what it was originally formed to do to begin with. So, yes, I know I'm going down a rabbit trail. But if you could, Eddie, go back and if you had to go back to New York City to live, what are some of the concepts that you would change in how your family lives over there now?
If we moved into New York City, first thing I would do is we would not move into an apartment building. We would find a house somewhere, because the problem is that those apartment buildings, they're relatively cheap to live in, but they're pretty secure. But like I said, you have no place to grow food or anything. There's no balcony other than using the windowsills on those windowsill gardening thing you showed me. You couldn't really grow your own food or anything other than maybe some herbs and spices that you would grow to accent your meal. But anything really sustainable or that would sustain you cannot be grown in those places. So we would I would first get a house and then fortify the crap out of it, just because there's no way that I would live in another house in New York City that wasn't fortified.
Do you think you'd ever move back to New York City?
No, I would never move back to New York City.
Why?
Ever. It's just crazy. Once you move from a city like that and realize security-wise, prepper-wise, what it's like, and the further west I get, the happier I get. I don't need to live the rat race life that I was living, working 12 hours a day, 5 days a week for peanuts. I think I was making a total of $36,000 to $40,000 a year, and I was working, 12 hours a day, and then I'd have 2 weird days off during the week, like a Tuesday and a Thursday. And you come out and you move out west, and it's not quite so crazy.
Yeah, and we've actually spent some time driving out west the further we go. Our goal is eventually to probably move out of Indianapolis. We still feel a little bit too tight here. But a question in the chat room is the fact that, a couple things. Political views. Do you think you and I agree on politics of the world, let's say with our government right now? Do you think we agree on that?
We agree on a lot of things. There's a couple of oddball things we don't agree on, but on the standard politics, yeah, we agree. With the current administration, we both don't like it. There's a lot of crazy things that can go.
Well, you grew up in New York City, which is a lot more restricted.
Liberal.
But liberal, yes, but it's still a lot more restricted than I grew up with. I mean, right now, you are not permitted to own a firearm without a special license. You, last I saw was you were not allowed to even order a beverage over a certain size.
Well,
that's just asinine.
It is. They nixed that, but yeah, you're right. The way those people in office would try and basically rule your life because of the way they saw fit is really. For me, it's uncompromisable. I will not compromise. I will not let somebody tell me you have to do this, you can do that, you can't do this, and when you live in those liberal states, they think they're doing good for you. they're giving you all this free money, what they call free money, but then you realize that there's so many strings attached to that money that you basically become their slave anyway.
And that's the mentality I've seen with your family. Most of your family, let's say, is it's hard for them to break that, to cut that string, to even get out of the city to the point. We'll never see your mom and dad leave there.
Oh, my mom, no. My dad's in Pennsylvania right now, but he's traveling back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, still hasn't broken the strings completely.
No, he's got like a rubber band attached to his waist. Every time he gets like to some other state, he bounces right back to New York.
Is that because of all of the stipulations they put and all the free stuff that they can get for living there and all that? I mean, we saw your mom go through Hurricane Sandy, where it's basically knocking on her windows, and the wind is so strong that it's blowing through the bricks of her apartment house. She's calling us at midnight saying, because we, a week out, as soon as we knew the hurricane was coming, we started talking to her. Okay, you need to get this. You need to do this. We didn't want to scare her, but we knew that she wasn't going to leave, and we knew that she needed to have some supplies. Now, when we said to go get water, she went and got a case of water. Now, there's like 7 people that live in her apartment. So a case of water, that's not even a day's worth of supplies. But they don't have access to stuff like that as much as we do. So she wouldn't leave, even though we said you probably need to, why don't you come over for a visit? It wasn't going to happen. Midnight, she calls us. I'm ready to leave. It's like, we can't get in there. We can't get out. There's no way. Yeah, you're out of luck. We can't do anything, which totally sucks from our end when we have family members that don't always listen to us when it comes to preparedness. It's hard to sit on this side and know the torment that she's going through over there. And, you want to come back and you want to bite, well, I told you so. But you can't do that because that just puts a brick wall up that the next time something happens, they're not even going to talk to you because they think you're going to make fun of them. Your best recourse is just to, each time something happens, build up their supplies little by little. Now, one thing that I appreciate about you, Eddie, is when it comes to getting our children involved in preparedness, you've researched and come up with some different ideas on how to get them a little bit more prepared, whether they knew it or not. And one of those things is with geocaching and learning directions and things like that. So why don't you tell everybody what geocaching is if they don't know?
Well, geocaching is like it's using a GPS to find a certain location. And
so they learn longitude, latitude.
Right. And you can use a map and a 8-digit grid coordinate or even a 10-digit grid coordinate if you do have how to use those. But with the kids, with Connor, what we did was we bought Callie, she did it for a little bit, but then she's too girly and doesn't want to do that stuff with us anymore. So Connor and I, we got a couple of GPSs, and you can use your iPhone or your Android phone, whatever.
So it's not taking the technology completely away from them to the point they break out in a rash.
Right. So you let them get their cell phone and get an app, or you get a GPS, and then you teach them. My favorite part was letting him learn to use the GPS and having him teach. And it's like treasure hunting. Geocaching is like treasure hunting. You're looking for a cache of stuff, or even if it's just a tiny little thing that's about the size of a screw, like a 1-inch screw with a hole in it that has a piece of paper for you to pull out, sign your name, say, I found it. And it's hidden God knows where. We found that one magnetic one that was underneath the sign and inside the framework.
Be very careful though if you are out geocaching, because you could be visited by the police, because you do look like sometimes you're doing something wrong. But you're not. I mean, people hide these things all over the country. Actually, it's all over the world. And they're hidden in public places, in lamp posts, in parking lots and stuff like that. So you have to be a little careful there.
So, right. And then with Connor, giving him the GPS, and then having him find it and then using it to orient the GPS, and then saying, okay, here's my trail. And then he'll point and say, where do you think it is? So he learned the basic use. I think it was 8 when we first started using this. at the age of 8 years old, he learned the basic use of a GPS or navigation. So he knows what to look for: north, south, east, and west, the four cardinal points. And then he also knows how to use this to find stuff. And he knows how to enter the longitude and latitude into the machine itself, into the computer. But then we went from that to math and how to orient the math and stuff. That was kind of boring for him, so it didn't work out too well for us.
Well, it got him a taste of it anyways.
Right.
There's a lot of kids out there that don't even know how to read a map. I work, my secular job works with people that deliver things, and the adults that come in that we hire don't know how to read a map, which is kind of startling if you think about it. So it does get them involved. It gets them, like I said, it's a sneaky backdoor way into getting some knowledge preps built into them, and they don't even realize it. Right. For Christmas, we went and we adjusted the way we do Christmas gifts or birthday gifts is we build it into, we give away things that would be put to good use if there was a downgrade situation, such as candles and, things along that line, some cool tools out there, or all of our children own their own firearms and know how to shoot.
Yeah. Boy, do they know.
They all have their own knives. They have fire jobs. I'm reading at the same time that I'm talking, and sometimes that doesn't always work well for me. But fire stills. All of our kids know how to light a fire because we do have a fire pit in our backyard. So when we have their friends come over, we'll have a big party. We'll say, okay, whoever starts the first fire without using a match, might win something, a little gag gift or something that we have there. So all of our friends, all of our children's friends also have learned over the years how to build a fire without using matches, use fire steel
or with a fire piston, or we did the bow drill one year. That worked out okay on some and not so okay on others. So
yeah, but please talk to their parents before you do anything like that, because some of them are not quite as open-minded as others. But luckily our kids made wise choices with their friends, and we've had no problems with that. But just a little disclaimer, please check with their parents if you do go that route.
Like we did Connor's birthday one year, where they all got a little Altoid tin with some paracord in it. We got permission from the parents if we could put a little knife in there. Remember that? And then we put some duct tape wrapped around an old hotel card key. So that way you have a flat, and then you had 5 or 10 feet of paracord and a knife and a little fire steel. So each kid that came to the birthday party, and I think there were 5 or 6 of them, got the little Altoids tin with their own personal survival kit. And then we went out to the backyard because they all spent the night. We
had a tent set up, so they got to camp out a little bit, and they got to use. Eddie walked them through everything that was in their Altoid tin and how to use it and what it could be used for. They built their own fire out there. No, we did not use gasoline in order to start the fire. We did it the old-fashioned way. And then they cooked their own food. And, geez, the kids thought this was awesome. And sometimes I think the parents get in the way anymore of our kids learning.
Does a hot dog in the fire count as cooking your own food?
Hey, it works for me.
Okay, all right.
They wouldn't starve if that's the only thing they had or knew how to do. I know we're big proponents of we, as preppers, we talk about food storage, and then you talk about being healthy, but quite honestly, I'd rather have somebody have food storage of ramen and Kraft macaroni and cheese than nothing at all. So do what you got to do at times to keep your family alive.
You can store all the green beans you want. If the kids won't eat it, they're going to starve.
Jimmy goes to Jimmy in the chat room. When they developed Velcro shoes, I knew the coming generations were doomed. I totally agree with that. If there's one thing, a pet peeve of mine, it is Velcro on shoes. And I know it has its uses in certain areas, but when the general population is nothing but Velcro shoes, there is a problem. But yes, I think parents nowadays just get in the way of our kids and the learning. And they give that privilege that they have to teach their children off to someone else who doesn't always do a very good job of that. So to completely agree with that.
With the kids that, our kids, and they're Connor and Callie and Kyle, they're all very responsible with the tools that we've given them. Like you said, they each have, the other two are grown up, but Connor has got his own pistol in the safe that, he doesn't have access to it all the time, without permission or whatever when we go to the range. But I love the fact that he's 13 and shoots a .45 better than most adults we know.
Yeah. And our kids, we've done it before. How would your kids feel if in the middle of, well, we don't have Saturday morning cartoons anymore. It's showing my age. But how would you feel, or how would your kids react if you, in the middle of you're sitting there watching TV one night, you walk out in the garage or wherever and shut the breaker off to your house? My kids now get a little excited. They're getting the candles out. They know where everything is at. And they're breaking out the cards and we play a lot of Farkle.
Yeah.
So they're whipping all that stuff out, saying, "Hey, let's do this."
Callie's looking for the solar charger so she can charge her cell phone.
No, I'll give her that. It's going to be hard for her. She's probably the toughest one out of all of them. But she would survive if she had to.
Well, yeah, she knows where the solar charger's at.
Yes, and her kid and her friends, actually all of our kids' friends are always like, if something happens, we're coming to your house.
Yeah.
It's like, come on over. That's why we don't just prepare for our family, but we, these are our extended family, our other children, as we call them. And they will always have a place in our home.
That is, yeah. And I agree with you with the children. And my worry is when they start bringing their moms, their dads, their uncles, their aunts, and their grandparents.
No, we'll stop. Yeah. Well, that being said, you've got a couple brothers that would bring quite a few extended family members too. So
my brothers know better.
Do you think that it helps our kids though with us finally getting on the same page when it comes to preparedness? Well, because at the beginning we weren't. To be honest with everyone.
No, in the beginning,
you take a city kid from Brooklyn, New York that's used to concrete and buying food, living day to day. And you merge that with a farm girl from Ohio, you've got problems. It's not been an easy road getting to where we're at now.
No, we butted heads over stuff. And like the fact that when you wanted your garden, I thought a, 16 by 16 foot plot would be all right. And ultimately we compromised on a 20 by 135 foot plot for you to plant.
Well, that was the first one. Now he understands, as part of our food supply, it's great that you store food, but you have to be able to replenish that. And in the same respect, yes, it's great you have a garden in your backyard, but what happens if there's a downgrade situation? Everybody out there is going to see that garden in your yard, know you have food. So one thing that we're working on right now is developing a food forest on our property where we can put our food supply out there that people, unless you know what you're looking at, would see it as just shrubbery or weeds or something along. We're mimicking nature if you want to look at it that way. So that's our next charge.
And trying to make it like its own little what's that thing called? Ecosystem.
Yeah, it will be self-sustaining. Yes, I see Rick in the chat room. Good morning, Rick. Yes, permaculture is a hot topic in our house right now. And that's what we're trying to establish. So that way, yes, we have our food storage, but we have to replenish that. And how would you do it? And how would you do it so everybody doesn't see your garden in the backyard?
And it's Rick's fault why I'm into the permaculture thing. It's his fault.
Yes, I will give Rick this after my husband talked to him for a little bit. My Brooklyn, New York husband has decided that it might be a cool thing to milk the goats once in a while.
Once in a while. You get those goats bred, and we're going to have to milk them twice a day. And you go out there at 8 in the morning and 8 at night, okay?
Yes, but he's seeing the benefits of this. Did I have to scare him into it? No. Has it taken a while? Yes. You have to be patient. You have to find what your spouse's hot buttons are, what their passions are when it comes to all the areas of preparedness, and let them do that. Let them take over that part of it. You can help them along. I'm not saying 100% that you should give them total control over it. I think it should be a mutual agreement in all areas of preparedness between both spouses.
It might not always be a mutual agreement, but as in a marriage, you have to have a compromise.
Well, there are whips for that, which you can make out of paracord, by the way. So
she says, "Whip, don't take her seriously. She's all about the sexual favors." Okay,
Eddie.
Okay, good.
Anyways, yes, you have to have mutual agreements in your life. Compromises, definitely. But can it be done? Yes, it can be done. Do you need to scare people into it? No, you don't need to scare people into it. We don't get into the doomsday tinfoil hat stuff as much as people think that we do. We're not the marauding type that you've seen on Doomsday Preppers or any of the other shows, but we take everyday circumstances. You know, I had knee surgery. I was out of work for 6 months. No issues. My family was fed. We're in a blizzard, you know, polar vortex, whatever. Hurricanes, tornadoes, you know, all of those kind of things. The water issue that West Virginia just went through or is going downstream right now. You know, we have all of those things taken care of where we can sit back, we can relax. Do you find, big question, Eddie, do you find now with our lifestyle of being better prepared versus your lifestyle in New York, you can relax a little more?
Me relax? Yeah, no, I do relax a little bit more. I'm more comfortable with the way we live now than the way I was when I was, you know, in New York. There's a lot less to worry about when you know that your preps are set. I mean, you know, where it's like, okay, I got to go get this. And you have, it's like they call, you know, the New York Minute. Because everything in New York's a rat race. Everything is like, you got to go fast. You got to go fast. You got to do this. You got to do. And you move out further west and it's more relaxed. So you're not as stressed out. And I think that ultimately will, you know, make life a little bit easier for everybody.
Yeah, I would agree. And anytime there is something coming towards us, such as 2 feet of snow, you know, it's nice to be able to sit home, light a fire in the fireplace, break out the cards, and just sit around and chat with each other, as opposed to, oh my goodness, I need to go get bread and milk.
Yeah.
Thank you, dear.
I love you. Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. You guys stay safe out there.